I'd like to welcome the presenters, very quick intros, and then we'll jump into questions. We've got speakers from Concentrix Tigerspike and ThoughtWorks, both of whom are very close partners of RMIT Online. We've also got a third panelist from RMIT Online itself. So first off, we have Ella Cullen, Internal Communications and Talent Acquisition Manager at Concentrix Tigerspike. Ella brings a passion to the conversation about ever-changing technology and its impacts on hiring trends, employee engagement. In her relatively short time at Concentrix Tigerspike over the last year, Ella's been developing a global mentorship program as well as a series of Tigress workshops aimed at supporting women within that Concentrix Tigerspike ecosystem. We also have Helen Souness, CEO at RMIT Online. Helen is my boss. So I'll be asking her the easy questions, as well as leading RMIT Online as CEO and visionary. Helen's a seasoned executive, having worked at market-leading companies including Seek, Lonely Planet, Invato, and Etsy, all who have had their own moments of reinvention and transformation. I can talk from direct experience when I say that Helen is passionate about creating a thriving community of lifelong learners over the last few years. And finally, and last but by no means least, Nigel Dalton, social scientist at ThoughtWorks, a hugely experienced leader and visionary across the digital sector, worked at multinational startups and everything in between, including stints at Lonely Planet, Accent Australia, and now at ThoughtWorks. He's founded a consultancy, Lunar Tractor. He's writing a book about lean and has a huge passion around how lean can help sectors such as healthcare, manufacturing, and mining improve those organisations that have pushed agile methods to their limits. So, without further ado, welcome Nigel, Helen, and Ella.
Hi, everyone.
And I'd just like to probably just kick off with a question because it's a topic that's been on our minds for the last 7 months. So we're all Melbourne based. With the end of lockdown in Melbourne, what's the first thing you each did once restrictions eased? Maybe I'll start with Nigel.
Madly. I reckon I've spent more time stuck inside since Captain Dan lifted the restrictions that I did during the month of October, when it was all about structured time out and making every last bit of use of the hour we were allowed outside. November has actually been quite an interesting and busy month for ThoughtWorks, and to a lot of businesses getting into the job of thinking about 2021. It's that usual cycle. February, budget's due, strategy's due, new funding in July. And so we've been taken a bit by surprise. And the end result, I've spent a lot of time right here.
Oh, it's time to get out, Nigel. Ella, how about yourself?
I've been the opposite. I've missed my social life dearly, but I've been out and about a lot. I have a 3.5-year-old daughter, so getting out of the house was a very exciting moment for us. So the first place I visited was probably a playground, which is not so exciting for me. But otherwise, I have been out with girlfriends. The month of December is extremely overwhelming. And I found myself to be slightly introverted. It was after COVID. So it's been quite hard to adapt. But yeah, it's been fun at the same time and exhausting.
Helen, how about you?
Well, to reveal what a party animal I am, I spent the weekend with my mum, who had been pretty lonely during lockdown. Jules.
Wonderful, thank you. So probably let's get into the topic at hand. I'll run through some questions. Nigel, how have businesses like ThoughtWorks had to pivot or adapt during the pandemic? Sorry, you still mute there, Nigel.
Oh, you scored the prize.
Yes,
somebody had to say that in the Zoom. You got there first. I was actually thinking for a moment, because it's been really, like, for everybody, I'm not sure we pivoted in that we're a native kind of distributed organization. Consulting organizations always are. You're working from people's places. And so we had a small office in the city. There would be 12 to 20 of us there on a regular basis. So we were super lucky having the native habits of working and connecting remotely. We'll keep some of those going. Like we had everyone in on Friday for a special lunch, catch up, who's new, those kind of things. That's like having to learn to recruit and build teams in that completely native remote time has been probably the greatest challenge. I think that great admiration for people who join companies kind of sight unseen without this physicality to it. But I don't know that we've had to change that much, which has been remarkable and very lucky. Can you consider that? And then really that's my reflection on the whole COVID thing. It's very, as the greatest unsupervised workplace sociology experiment in history, it's been very, very poorly controlled, with the conditions for all different people being remarkably different. And our office is really for the people who were stuck in a North Carlton or Collingwood share house with terrible technology, terrible internet, and freezing over the winter, now going to about cook themselves over a summer. And we'll keep that spirit going. We'll re-architect our office, I think, into more of a, what we used to think of as a co-work space, but that'll be the impact.
Yeah, you touched on building teams there, and Ella, I'd be interested in your input into sort of talent acquisition and how you've onboarded people through this time and some of those learnings that you've had.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been a challenge. I would say that communication, working with your team and process are probably key to getting it right. Luckily, we are quite a flexible working environment already, so we never really had the challenge of reinstating new communication tools. So we use Slack. We've got an onboarding tool called Donut that already communicates with someone before they start. We knew that Zoom and meeting people is exhausting, so we've made sure that we've kept on check with that. We also have a buddy system, so anyone that joins remotely, they have someone they can touch points with, and they can make sure they meet all the relevant people, but not too many, not everyone at once. I actually had a really funny comment from one of my new starters the other day. They said, Ella, I don't know how tall anyone is in the office. I've only seen them from the shoulders up. Are they going to be really shocked that I'm tall? Yeah. And I said, well, I'm 5'1", so you're probably going to be shocked that I'm so short. So it's been a challenge, but I think that in the technology industry, we're quite well designed for these sorts of onboarding processes, especially moving forward, but we could always do better.
Yeah, absolutely. Helen, your own sort of reflections, in a sense, around sort of RMIT Online, some of the experiences we've had with onboarding in the last few months.
Yeah, we've added more than 25 people during lockdown, and I was really thrilled with our recent sort of engagement survey that we saw actually over 90% engagement of those people, which I think is a small miracle, and big credit to our leaders that these people have felt welcomed, have felt able to do their job, do their best work in such a challenging time. So it shows it's possible. I think we are lucky, Ella, aren't we, as more online based companies, that all our tools are online. We moved any boards that were remaining on the walls, moved to Trello overnight as we left the office. And just amazing inventiveness of every team, really, to solve the problems of remote and welcome people anyway. But isn't it funny how people still want to catch up? Like, we've had instances of newbies joining who are on Ocean Road and therefore had a bit more freedom in the regions, who had coffee with all these people from other teams. They somehow found each other. I don't think it was our making, but they still met for coffee and still want to, and our team, we're not back in the office yet and won't be before Christmas, but so many team catch-ups happening. People still want to see each other in person. It's really interesting.
I had the luck of hearing Dr. Anita Sands, who's a ThoughtWorks director, but an absolute astonishingly prolific author and writer on the subject. So she got stuck in New Zealand, of all places, in March. Wow. And her previous writing had been about culture and diversity and inclusion, particularly building organizations which are good at solving hard problems. Stuck in New Zealand in March, couldn't fly back to America, and ended up doing some crazy research in our home country, Helen, about resilience. And she's come up with a formula around it. We'll perhaps share the link to her talk on it. It's quite remarkable. But what her analysis showed was that the office and the kind of the great water cooler connection thing wasn't about facts and wasn't about what was going on. It was about belonging. Yeah. And what you were trading was a sense of belonging, and belonging is a vital commodity for organizations to create in some way. So look, it's great research. And I think, that's what we reflect on, is just making sure really carefully that we haven't lost that.
Outside some, obviously, we've got three, largely from what you're saying, sort of digital business set up and to handle the transition quite well. But those other organisations, those other industries, individuals, that had to transform probably in some ways more in a bigger way. 1-3 cabs pivoting to become a delivery service, museums and zoos, having to pivot the way they connect people in. I had a great experience with my 11-year-old having a session with Melbourne Zoo where they took them through, took the class through a really good session around scary Australian animals, of which there are many, which was actually in some ways probably more effective than being there staring at a tank. What do you think are the most interesting transformations you've each seen over this time, and who's done it well perhaps outside that digital sector? Ella, did you want to start?
Yeah, sure. There's a few actually. I tried to think yesterday and rack my brains. The hospitality industry obviously took a massive hit, and then obviously engaged take-home luxury meals. So Providore is something that springs to mind. I don't know if you used it, but ordering food takeaway. But then I found it interesting because they've almost converted back to normal now. Another one for me is Archie Rose Gin. They converted to making hand sanitizer, which was interesting. But in terms of something that I was trying to rack my brains yesterday for something that's stuck, and the only thing I could think was probably fitness companies. A lot have moved online and may stay online for quite a long time, dependent on how restrictions are. But that was all I could think of yesterday. I'm sure there's many more.
Yeah. Helen, how about yourself?
Yeah, a super cute one, if for people with kids, was Phillip Island Nature Parks. Who are a tourism site. So you would think disaster and what can you do about it? But they took the penguin parade, the evening arrival of the penguins that used to be a sort of stadium type experience in the flesh, and they put it free online. And in the early days of that, I mean, they have 700,000 visitors a year in person. In the early stages, they were getting 500,000 views of that parade, and then asking for donations and actually, keeping their funding going through an absolute crisis in the tourism industry. So yeah, I loved that one. And actually I loved what it added, the forum of video, the way that has a strange intimacy, like we feel like we're talking to each other now. You were hearing from a naturist who, was goofy and delightful, and you were getting much more into the environmental aspects of the penguin parade rather than the spectacle when you're there in person. It was much more intimate and much more about the ecology. So yeah, very interesting pivot for me. I love that one.
We tuned into that as well.
Yeah, great, isn't it?
Nigel, did you have any good examples?
Well, look, I'm an avid reader and just finished a book that came out this week, a lady called Anne Bowden, who was the CEO and founder of a bank called Starling Bank in the UK, which she's meant this, what an amazingly timely launch of a purely digital bank. So one of the neobanks, the first to become profitable. It was the first in the market, and I absolutely, probably my business book of the year. It's called Banking on It. Tremendous story in the last parts about what they did to adapt to COVID and how they busted some myths about what could and couldn't be done, which is one of the themes in her life. So two situations that really struck home for me, which were brilliant adaptations for these times. One was the problem of an elderly person locked down in COVID, or a family person who couldn't get to do the groceries. Now, I don't know if you know, but it's technically kind of not really allowed to go giving your card to a neighbor and the passcode and telling them, I'll just use my card down the shops. And so that was clearly a problem, because cash suddenly wasn't allowed. And then what do? You break the law kind of thing. And so what Starling did was we could make a kind of card that was a companion card that was controllable through the app, that they could give to the Good Samaritan neighbor or their niece or whoever would do the shopping for them, use up to its limit, bring the groceries back, hand it back. It had a PIN number. It was controlled through the app. That is the most brilliant combination of a COVID constraint, a technology, some really human-centered design in terms of doing that. But, that and, people who are getting checks mailed to them, but small businesses getting checks in the mail during the COVID lockdown, can't get to the bank. What did they do? Well, there's no way that a photograph of a check would be a legitimate currency, right? That's surely against the law. And so what they did was, within the app, you snap the check, you upload it, you screw up the check, and the check is banked. Those are amazing kind of constraints brought upon you by COVID that have just ignited people's creativity to find brilliant solutions that the other banks are going to struggle to keep up with.
Yeah, and it's interesting. So I'd like to sort of tap into kind of what's next in a way in terms of transformation, and COVID has obviously forced and triggered a whole amazing range of innovations and solutions. But the transformations are going to they're with us, and they've always been with us in many ways. But as we move forward, if we look at the transformations of the future and the how the workforce, I guess, are prepared for that, the skills and resilience to adapt to that change. Helen, I might just ask you, how prepared do you think Australians are for that or Australians are for that next workforce, and what the skills gaps are we're seeing?
Yeah, it's really sad to me that we're very shortly likely to hit 1 million unemployed in Australia, and yet we have structural gaps in the labour market around technology, digital skills, actually in healthcare and education as well, with an ageing population and a mental health crisis. So we've got these really clear skill gaps, hundreds of thousands of roles that can't be placed while we have such a high unemployment. And look, I know it looks self-interested for me to say, educate, but really there is this gap, there is this skills gap of the people that are unable to get work and needing to upskill to get into these really high demand areas. We're seeing cybersecurity needs 18,000 more workers. Just Salesforce itself, just one technology out of many, needs about 80,000 people over the next few years. So it's just massive opportunities with the right skills. So it's all about upskilling. And look, that obviously we're building courses in those areas for that reason, to try and address the skills gap. But there is also like project work in your current role, take extension projects, learn coding at home, test and learn and push yourself to grow those skills over time is what we are recommending very strongly.
Yeah, Ella, are you kind of, from a talent perspective, what are you noticing? What are the trends you're noticing as you look to hire people?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what's key to us at Concentrix Tigerspike is to be able to interview people and bring people in that are able to rapidly change. In our business, we need people in the company who are willing to change. We're going through quite a bit of change at the moment with the parent company. So to be proactive in finding new solutions, like work on another project, like Helen suggested, aim at hiring people that don't only have good technical skills, but also good soft skills. And soft skills is one that is, not generally out there in the technical market at the moment, but it's something that we really need, because then they're willing to learn, to take on new projects, to go beyond their job description. So ideally, people are needed in the future market that are willing to find solutions to help them progress their career. Anyone that's not willing to adapt won't go very far. But yeah, upskill. So take on as many projects as you can.
Yeah, for sure. There's a question from, thanks. The questions are coming in from the attendees. Wonderful. So kind of connected to that, wonder what the panel's view is on future difficulties for career seekers applying for jobs, competing in that application process specifically. Many people find it hard to get an interview get to the interview phase anyway. What's going to change, and what's going to take you to that, what's going to be like in the future just to get to the interview phase, and how's that process going to work?
It's very difficult at the moment because there are many people all applying for the one job. So you really have to make sure that you stand out in the market. So whether that means looking at the person on LinkedIn and messaging them directly because your application may be flooded by others, it's going to change rapidly, and our interview process or our application process may change. But I would suggest to find other avenues. If it's not just the job application, then to find something else that would push you through to meet that company that you're so excited to work for in the future.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, there's also if we look at a diversified workforce, and obviously there's a growing sort of gender gap, shortage of women in tech. There's a older workforce continuing to work older, and another question from the panel around how some advice for upskilling for the kind of older, the more mature worker, I guess. What are probably throwing it to the panel to discuss what can we do about that? How do we address the diversification issue in the workforce?
I'll go if you want. I mean, for me, I'll move on to the slightly mature skill set there. But for me, we need to start obviously at school level. So introduce more STEM subjects to women, encourage people in, we're obviously in a very fast paced tech industry. So we need to offer, have a strong focus on diversity, equity and inclusion. So make sure that we're offering skill sets for more women to go into the workforce, such as better maternity leave up to industry standards. You need to make sure that you're offering a mentorship program so that all people have guidance in different areas. So whether that's focused on a diverse workforce and removing all the barriers for people that are coming from a diverse background or women in your recruitment stage, so that when you move forward, you actually open yourselves up in a tech market to be open to everyone in the market. But I mean, this is an ongoing problem. It's not going to be fixed overnight, but it's definitely something being worked on at the moment for all companies, I should hope.
I love some of the AI-driven kind of applications where you remove names and backgrounds to make sure that there is no bias in the process. They seem very powerful, don't they? In terms of the request of people of how do you get that interview and how do you prove yourself, and also I could link in the question of what if you don't have the money for studying. I think evidencing your skills, so almost trying to think of yourself as, less CV, more portfolio of work, and how you build that. Also for the grad that was worried about finding work. So, even if you can't afford our courses where you're supported by teachers and so on, there's a lot of free learning online in MOOCs and so on. I mean, the Swift course we run supports you in your learning and scaffolds it, but Swift curriculum, i.e. how to code a mobile app, is available free online from Apple Direct as well. And a lot of these free learnings, if you can really apply yourself, and get to the point where you have built a little mobile app, you've got evidence of what you can do. And you're proving a number of things: initiative, diligence to apply yourself and learn something new, that you're a lifelong learner. You've proved that by doing it. And you've got evidence of what you're capable of that you could actually demonstrate. For example, if you're trying to say get into coding, but that example would go across many, many disciplines. Evidence it is a thing that will really make you stand out, rather than just thinking you're a CV, because that's super hard to stand out with.
Yeah, I agree.
And as the resident social scientist, I'll contradict you both.
Okay, good.
I think the STEM rush is overrated. That I read this thing recently about what Australia needs right now is I mean, there's tradies parked on every street corner. We need e-tradies. And I started to think about the haves and the have-nots of who have been resilient to COVID. We've got friends who've got small businesses they've built. They're artists. They make stuff, or they're food paddock to plate kind of things. The ones who could manage Squarespace and Shopify and an Instagram account, then those are no-code solutions. The ones who did that have actually done okay. The ones who didn't, who couldn't manage a kind of order your coffee online and get it passed through the window, those kind of things, they're the ones you're seeing, like the 1 in 5 shops downtown that are not open anymore, or, in South Melbourne, near where I live, those kind of things. And I go, for the want of some people who were of any age, particularly, but I think had an empathy for business, a quick course at RMIT Online to become an e-tradie. And this is what I love. Like, this could be the arts graduates, because they can tell stories. Storytelling is going to be one of the key things about going forward in this really hardcore online world. Storytelling, ethics, for all of we talk about, you raised it, Helen, the magic of machine learning and the speeding up and the invention. But whoops, cat's just intervening there. But understanding the ethical elements of that that's a social science. That's not really generally adopted heavily by engineers, those kind of people. And I've got a friend who's an actor, and I'm encouraging her to do a startup to teach us all to act, because we're all on TV right now. And some people are good at this, and some people really struggle with this. But in fact, we're acting. And what an amazing time to learn the rules of improv and to learn the rules of acting So that might be a course you offer next year at RMIT Online, Helen. I'm not sure.
Yeah, love it. Love it. It's a very powerful skill.
Yeah, for sure. I think, yeah, add it to the roadmap. Yeah, I think, it's interesting because as a local Italian where I live in, it's by far the best Italian in the area, but they struggled with their website, Nigel, to your point, to really, I just couldn't order. I couldn't work out their menu in the early days and really struggled. And it was such a simple thing to just get your menu right with a phone number. That's all I needed, but I couldn't get to it. And, unfortunately, they closed the doors. So I think it's a really good point. Nigel and Helen, you've had multiple careers in your young years. Helen from lawyer to digital products and marketing, and Nigel from geography to CIO to chief invention officer, and now social scientist. How do you make these transitions? And what's your advice for people who want to pivot their career beyond just the upskilling and staying relevant, but actually pivot their career and go hard something new? Helen, Nigel, do you want to start?
Oh, I'm happy to start. I'm full of books. This is what lockdown's been great for, is actually doing a bit more reading. So my other business book of the year is Scott Galloway's new book. So he wrote The Four, which is a brilliant explanation of why we all need to think about the role of Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple in our daily lives and where they're going as organizations, whether from e-learning to mortgages to credit cards to all of those kinds of things. There's a lovely quote, and he's written a book called Post-Corona, which I recommend as a kind of that's good, a good way of thinking through this kind of recovery build phase we're going into. A step backward after making a wrong turn is a step in the right direction. And that's kind of like, that's a mantra I can live by, and I have lived by many, many times. So I've got a 19-year-old. My solid career advice to him is, if someone offers you a pretty tough assignment, take it, because you will learn the most. And fastest to learn wins in the 21st century. So I don't mind whether that's from books structured online, listening to mentors or people or colleagues or otherwise, or even a younger generation. YouTube. What an amazing asset. I mean, it's the number one search engine in a particular demographic as well. And those are the things, if I look back over my career. Helen, career-wise for you and I don't know if you noticed, Lonely Planet sold today.
Oh,
New owners. You're in my common
Again.
so many years ago. I wish we'd learned to pivot back then, by the way. But I look at a tough assignment. A period of pain and learning is the fastest way to transition, and just people are pretty reluctant to take on pain. Let's be honest; it's uncomfortable, and learning is uncomfortable. Until you see the musical instruments behind me, that is entirely a reminder of the pain I inflict on others teaching. Because going from not knowing to knowing is a journey of uncertainty and ambiguity and literal. A sense of pain, which I suffer. I'm a terrible guitarist. Punk rock as far as I've got so far. And that's the humbling nature of learning. And I think getting comfortable with being uncomfortable is probably the key.
Yeah, that's so funny. I talk to grads quite often, Nigel, and that's exactly the line I focus on the most. And actually practicing that in things like learning a guitar, or in my case, trying to ride a horse well. And, it's very confronting. Being bucked off is very confronting. And getting comfortable with uncomfortable in every aspect of your life helps you in your work to do it. I actually really believer in that. Look, my advice, Jules, on your question is extend yourself beyond what you're currently doing. The best career advice I ever got that I can share is if you want a different job, start doing it. And it's amazing how often in my career, by doing extension projects, so say I was in marketing with that little label over my head at Seek, how do I get into a CEO role one day? Well, I did big extension projects. I did marketing plus projects in software development, and I took Seek Agile with Nigel's advice at the time. So I was proving myself in other areas, and it wasn't for money or glory, frankly, internally. It was to grow myself And then I had evidence in the next interview to show I could do more than marketing. So it's just continuing to extend yourself and actually look for those, sometimes painful processes, but ones that you'll grow, and focusing on that rather than sort of promotion or money, or it's self-extension, I think, is the way to keep growing. And if you're not growing, you're sort of dying in ecological terms. So, keep growing.
It's somewhere between that sort of humility and, God, may the gods grant you the confidence of a white man in a PowerPoint pack. And, just there's an element of that comes into it too. That's that continuum you have to survive on,
That back to the acting classes. It's been lots of comments positive on that. I think it might be on the roadmap.
I definitely agree with that. I think, like you said, now is the time to be adaptable. I've actually been through something similar in the past year where talent acquisition we were on a freeze for a little while. So I was going, right, well, how do I adapt to this? How do I change? How do I create something that I enjoy? And I ended up doing things such as like this, putting myself out there and rolling out the mentorship program or rolling out initiatives such as a Tigress workshops, is that I actually ended up getting a promotion at the end of it, because I just put myself out there and not focused on just my one career mindset. In regards to anyone else out there, I would just make yourself indisposable. Sounds sounds awful, but take your advice and get mentors. If that's some direction that you want to move in, make sure that you're really putting yourself out there, and never be afraid to ask, I think.
Yeah. And actually, that's such great advice. And I think this would be my reply to you, Paul, again, around how do you, in networking circumstances, kind of describe those diverse careers, and admittedly, trying to do a summary of mine because it jumps all over the place is really hard. But what I actually focus more on in those networking moments is where you want to go, and what you could offer to where you want to go. So I actually would be, again, much less about the history and much more about, I want to lead a team next. I'm ready for management, and I'm ready because, and I can evidence it here and here and here where I've led virtual teams or whatever it is. Speaking about the future and daring to put out into the world. It's a risk you take, but you have to take risks to get those wins and those next steps. And the risk is putting out there what you want and why you'd be great at it. And yes, even if it needs a bit of acting skills some days to project that confidence.
If I think of specific case studies of people at REA Group, for example, who transitioned their careers, we had someone who went from lawyer to product manager, from finance to product manager. It's going to sound like a terrible ad, Helen, but both of them did the product management course at RMIT Online out of their own pocket. So I got them a discount because we're mates, but that gumption, to step out and go, wow, $1,000 of my own money. Yeah. I'm serious. And that really factored into our thing here going, you're serious. So we're serious about helping you make a transition. And it was a great place to do that. It was a big employer, not having to change employers. Rather than losing talented people, we had a software developer become a UX designer through doing the CX course with you as well. God, I'm sounding like a great ad, but there's not many alternatives, to be honest.
I know, we've got one at the moment. I mean, a lot of our team is doing our courses, and which is, makes me probably one of my favorite things about this year, that about 40% of our team has done one of our courses. And we've got that at the moment, that a coder wanting to get into UX team did the course, and the thing is, the courses end with, I really am an ad now, but with a project. So you end up with some evidence of your new skill. And we've designed those quite consciously, that you want to have something productive to take back into your business if you're doing the course for work, or alternatively, if you're trying to do it to break into a new space, that you've got evidence of that new skill, you've got your UX work to show. And yeah, we've got someone doing a secondment at the moment. Nothing makes me happier than the lifelong learning in our own team.
Yeah, great. We've got 5 minutes left, so I'm keen to get to a couple more questions from the audience. And so probably, obviously, feel free anyone to jump in. how would you, in terms of leading a team, how would you sort of suggest, or what would your advice be about leading a team that's not overly open to change, that extra work and study that goes with what we need to do to change, even though they're aware of the situation, they just, they don't, they're not overly open to the things that need to be done.
I could have a first go on. The others are thinking. I think there's two things. I think the burning platform. It is real around us now, and you can point to a million things prior to this year, frankly, that has simply accelerated through COVID around industries being killed, the disruptor becoming the disrupted. You look at a Seek, disrupted newspapers, got disrupted by LinkedIn to some degree. There is so much evidence of the need for rapid agility in every single industry. So the burning platform for your own industry and making the case for that, and not beating around the bush. It's often about survival. It's about growth too. And if you're motivated that way, we've been talking positively about those things. If you're not motivated that way, you actually need the kick to say you have to do it, or we won't survive. So burning platforms one, and then purpose is the other. Going back to why are we here? What are we trying to achieve? And linking the change to that we will serve more students. We will be able to do a better job for our mission, for example, in my case, if we do this change. And linking to purpose, I think is my one, but love to hear yours, guys.
Mine would be to over communicate why you need to change and why you need to be adaptable, and come along for the ride, and communicate it in a positive manner as well, and showcase experiences of other people or other experiences that you've been through.
Great, thanks, Ella. Nigel?
I'm just going to steal Anita Sands stuff again if you get a chance to watch that video. In her ABCD formula is awareness, and she really emphasizes you have to be aware of, situationally, what have your team been through? What are they going through? Whether that's at home in their ordinary everyday life, or within the work context, and you've got to balance that sense of reality with a sense of aspiration accordingly. The C in ABCD stands for curiosity, and that's the superpower. So if you can demonstrate it, particularly, but try and instigate some curiosity about new things. Curiosity is the strangest psychological effect. It is the only known antidote to fight, flight, freeze, is to kind of tap into that. I think everyone's a little bit naturally curious. And that get them curious about what could be. Which is another way of saying what's in it for me, which is the old way of doing it in the 90s. There's always something in it, but start with awareness and then go to curiosity.
Great stuff. We've got a couple of minutes. I'm going to ask a question, and we'll try and keep it as short as possible, but I think this is a really good one given the topic of the conversation around constant reinvention. Do people become exhausted by this constant change, and how do we kind of protect against that?
Oh, this is a good one. I think maybe just be supportive as a workplace to that, and make sure that there is no emotional burnout. And as a leader, be curious of your employees not reaching the burnout level. I mean, I can't speak from experience. Helen may be able to speak on this one, but I've noticed that people really do put themselves out there, but in the wrong way. They emotionally burn out. So you've just got to be curious and be aware of your employees, especially during this time.
Yeah, asking that in December, which is always an exhausted time of the year, where we, for some crazy reason, also try and burn the candle at both ends socially, let alone in COVID year. Yes, I think people get exhausted by change, absolutely. And I've had lots of lessons in the toughness of this year from my team. So yes, I think that's really right. I think it's empathy. And ultimately energizing around the positives for purpose, for personal development of that change, getting them to a positive place around it, because there is often, I mean, you're not making change to make things worse. There is an energizing factor to the benefits that are going to flow, but empathy to start with. I think that's your awareness in some ways, Nigel. There's, parents teaching kids at home. There's been all sorts of reasons this year. People are fatigued beyond where they can cope, and just understanding that and being flexible about that.
Yeah, I've just shared a podcast actually that I listened to recently. It might be worth a listen.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ella.
Yeah.
Nigel, quickly, and then we'll wrap.
I think we should all be aware. This has not been evenly distributed. The impacts have not. McKinsey's Lean In report for 2020, fascinating. You've got 33% of mothers who are working saying, "I'm done. I have to step back," because this has been a horrible year for them, where they have juggled everything, and this has not been a fair experiment at all in alternate ways of working or what the future could look like that. So if there was a fault line in your organization before, COVID just cracked it open.
Yeah.
So get back to that original, what were your goals with people? What was your culture? What were you aspiring to? Stop writing stupid policies and start getting to understand the needs of individuals.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Nigel, Ella, and Helen. Thank you for your time. Also, sort of personal thank you to the RMIT Online marketing team through this year, who, these sessions are an example of reinvention of how we do this, and it's been hugely well received and successful. So well done for organising that. We've thank you for all the attendees for joining through this session and all of our on the couch sessions. It's been great to have such engagement through, not just in attendance, but through the chat, which has just been, I've not been keeping up because I'm focusing on talking, but I'd love to read some of those comments after this. We have recorded the session. We'll send out a link to everyone that's attended. So please feel free to forward that on to anyone as well that you couldn't make the event. Stay in touch around our upcoming events and through all the usual social channels, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Insta being the main ones we use. And for anyone interested in learning more and upskilling, jump on to online.rmit.edu.au. We did not pay Nigel to promote our courses, but thanks for doing that anyway, Nigel. So thank you, everyone. And have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Right. Ciao, you all.
Bye.